Okay, so this is just a bit of a foreword here. This video ended up being around 50 minutes long, and I was aiming for every video to be around 15 minutes long. Yeah, so I'm splitting this into two different parts, and what I would suggest is after you watch this first part and then the second part, and it still doesn't make sense, if it still doesn't make sense, I should say, go ahead and leave me a little message or a comment or something, and then I can further explain this if necessary, just because it can be a little bit confusing. So hopefully this video helps, and then I will break it up around the 20-minute mark. Okay, love you, bye. Alrighty, now that you're an expert with regards to upstrokes and downstrokes, let's get to actually applying those in the music. And since this is something that I actually want to make sure that I'm explaining well, to negate any confusion, I'm actually going to be doing a voiceover script for this. So I don't know what I'm going to throw in the video yet. I'm just recording, but it's got to be something entertaining. The process of adding stroke preps is essentially this. We are analyzing the music that we're playing and applying or assigning the proper stroke types to set up for the next note that is being played by that hand. So, speaking very generally here, every note that you play will lead somewhere. Something is coming up for the hands after every single note that we play, and we're going to use that concept to our advantage. We'll talk more about that process as we go on. First, let's cover a couple things to help make this concept as useful to you as possible. While we're working on these exercises, there are 3 distinct stick heights that you want to keep in mind. And there's a little bit of an asterisk to that I will get into at the end, because this is already going to be kind of a confusing concept to relay to you. So I want to make sure that I'm not adding too much information at the beginning. So we'll get to that at the very end. But more to the point, you want to have a big distinction in between your accent, your tap, and your flam grace note height. Another way you can think about this is fortissimo, mezzo forte, pianissimo. You can think of 9-inch stroke, 6-inch stroke, 1-inch stroke. Or you can think of floors of an elevator, 3rd floor, 2nd floor, 1st floor. And obviously sort of the asterisk to that is that the dynamics will change with the dynamics of the music. We're just going to go over these with the idea that mezzo forte is going to be our starting place. You can raise these stick heights as necessary, except for the flam grace note. But again, that's a little bit confusing and not to the point of what we're working on today. In exercises, a lot of the time what we do is go from full strokes, like 15-inch strokes, all the way down to 1-inch strokes. Instead, try going from a 9-inch stroke to a 6-inch stroke for your accents to your taps. More than likely, the reason that you can't hear your school's snare drums from the sidelines is that their taps are at 3 inches rather than 6 inches or 9 inches or whatever the dynamic is written. To illustrate this, let's take some mezzo forte paradiddles. And on these paradiddles, of course, every time we get a big beat, 1 E and a 2 E and a paradiddle, paradiddle, we're going to add an accent. And for our accents, we decided that we are going to add 2 dynamic levels. So we're going to have fortissimo, mezzo forte, mezzo forte, mezzo forte, fortissimo, mezzo forte, mezzo forte, mezzo forte. And if you're confused about this, then go back to the last video on accents, stroke types, and stick heights. Okay, so what am I saying? I'm saying that if we've got paradiddles that we're playing and we want them to be mezzo forte paradiddles, we should not have the first stroke be at a full stroke, right? A ceiling or a vertical stroke, 15-inch stroke, and then have all of the rest of them be at pianissimo strokes. So we don't want to go 15-inch, 1-inch, 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 15, 1, 1, 1, 15, 1, 1, 1. What we want to have is a 9-inch stroke, 6, 6, 6, 9-inch stroke, 6, 6, 6. 9, 6, 6, 6. So let's actually hear the difference in between those. Paradiddle, here we go. And obviously a lot of people aren't going to play slower paradiddles like that with such a disparity in their stick heights. But a lot of times what happens as the music gets sped up, we aren't thinking so much about our stick heights. We're just thinking about playing the rudiment and getting that huge accent differentiation and everything else, who knows, just play them softer, okay? And while you should note that playing on the drum set in this way actually in a lot of cases can be okay and actually sound better than having, for example, the snare be a lot louder than the toms, because you're not keeping your tap height low enough on the snare drum. But for rudimental playing, it's not a great foundation to start with. Now let's take a look at some Mezzo Forte paradiddles with more appropriate stick heights. Paradiddle, here we go. So you can see by playing in that way, I'm not just reducing my paradiddles to being big and then little in between the accents and the taps. I've got a little bit more of a range that I can play with. If I want this to get louder, I can go, instead of 9 to 6-inch strokes, I can go from 15 to 9-inch strokes. Or if I want to go a little bit quieter, I can go from 6 to 3-inch strokes, and so on and so forth. And while we're working on this, remember to keep quick motions in mind. We want to get where we're going quickly and with purpose. Also, practicing these single hand exercises with both hands together will help you quite a lot as well. So if you've got an exercise or a passage that you're only focusing on the right hand, try doubling it and playing it with the left hand at exactly the same time so that you can compare the motions and what is happening in one hand to the other. And as the last sort of pro tip, try practicing these patterns with music. Put on some of your favorite jams and just pick an appropriate speed to play these exercises over. And your practice flow should look like this. Once you get the motion, add a metronome or some kind of beat keeper, like your favorite song or whatever, to this so that you actually keep moving and you're improving in this process. You don't want to get stuck in only being able to play these at one speed or in a process that leads you to taking too much time in one aspect of the motion and you're not actually being able to speed these up to a point where they're actually applicable. And with further regards to your practice habits, make sure that you are practicing with a mirror while you're getting the idea, and then video record yourself. Video practice is non-negotiable at this point. You can't fully focus on your playing, and much less while you're learning a new concept while you're playing. You have to review the video of yourself playing this kind of stuff to fully evaluate how well you're executing the motions necessary to achieve the level of efficiency we're looking for. And lastly, I don't typically like starting off with saying, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. But there are 3 things that I want you to keep in mind in your evaluation, that if you notice yourself doing these, to try to adjust them as quickly as possible because they can lead to sloppy performance and practice habits. The first thing that we want to make sure that we are not doing is that we don't prep the prep. So what I mean by that is if we're doing a tap height stroke and our stick ends up at around 6 inches off the drum head and we go to play, make sure that you're not accidentally maybe lifting the stick a little bit before you go to play. If we have a 6-inch stroke, a tap stroke from this height, drop the stick. Just drop the stick. Play the stroke, drop the stick. Make sure that you're not doing this when you review your videos of yourself practicing, that you end up something like this, where you are prepping the prep. The whole point of what we're doing today is making sure that the stick ends up where we want it so that we can think less. We just drop the stick from where it is. And piggybacking off of this concept, this is kind of a similar thing, although I actually classify them as 2 different things. So a lot of times I think when people are prepping the prep, they don't really realize that they're adding that extra little lilt in there, or whatever you want to call it, to give it that extra little height. I don't think that they are starting at taps and accidentally mean to go up to an accent height. I think it's just something that we do naturally. Before we play, we just pick up the stick and then throw it down. This next thing has to do with moving quickly and with purpose, like what we talked about before. Make sure that you set up to the stick height that you want to get to. Okay, so if you're playing a tap stroke up to an accent stroke, get there quickly. Okay, so for a tap, setting up for an accent, we just get there quickly. Okay, make sure you're not doing this where it's a tap rebounding to a tap height, and then at the last second, you're coming up for the accent height. We want to just fully rebound with an upstroke and then get up to that accent height, drop it, and then we have our accented note. And the last thing, to sort of reiterate what we were talking about with the various stick heights before, don't just practice these as big stroke, little stroke, as in accent, tap. We want to make sure that we are playing appropriate stick heights. And again, we're framing all of this under the understanding that all of our taps are a mezzo forte dynamic. Again, this will change depending on the music that you're actually playing, and will be determined by the dynamic actually written. But what you want to make sure you're not doing, again, is to have those 15-inch strokes down to 1-inch strokes for an accent tap. Right? If you've got an accented mezzo forte into a mezzo forte with no accent, so another way to say an accent tap, okay? So you can hear it's louder, softer. It's not earth-shatteringly loud, massive meteor hitting the earth and then ladybug fart at the bottom. It's just an appropriately loud, accented mezzo forte down to a mezzo forte tap. Okay, so as we go along with this, I'm going to explain this a few different ways. I'm going to cut in and out of these playing examples with the video, with some voiceover stuff, with some pausing, freeze frames, little red circles, and all that stuff. So hopefully this makes sense, but for now, let's just kind of go with this. Just go along with me for a second, and I think it'll start to click as, if not before, I'm explaining what we're doing. Let's just go ahead and take this first example, which sounds accent, tap, accent, tap, accent, tap, accent, tap, meaning that we'll have a 9-inch stroke, a 6-inch stroke, a 9, 6, 9, 6. And to apply the knowledge that we've got from our last video to this point, we'll have a down, up, down, up, down, up. 1 and 2 and 3 and ready, go. And again, but a little faster. 1 and 2 and 3 and ready, go. And something to keep in mind while we're working on these that you may not have heard before is the concept of playing through the drum head, right? So it's the same concept as like a sprinter running 100 meters. When you are running up to the finish line, so meaning to say when we're throwing the stick into the head, we're not thinking, okay, stop right at the finish line, right? You want to keep going 100%, 100%, 100%. Until past the finish line, right? You want to aim 10 meters behind the finish line so that you keep that momentum up and keep going. So in other words, we don't want to think of just hitting the head, right? If I think of that, that's the kind of stroke that I get from an accent position, right? We want to think of the head being down here somewhere so that we get nice full powered strokes. The reason that we're doing this is not only does it give us a nice fuller sound, a better sound quality and all of that, but it also makes us have to think less while we're playing our different stroke heights. The reason we use stroke heights is so that we don't have to think of the amount of force, okay? If I play from an accent position, it should always sound at that exact same volume. Meaning if I want to play a softer note, I only have to modify my stick height. So I'm still playing that with the same speed and the same amount of force in my mind as this, but by the time the stick actually travels into the head, it's had more time to gain more of that force and I don't know, physics, whatever, but we don't think of playing softer as just playing slower, right? Or just playing softer. No. Every time I'm at a fortissimo stick height, it's going to come out as a fortissimo stroke. I'm going to play that same force or that same stick speed from Mezzo Forte, but it will just come out quieter. Same thing for pianissimo. I'm still using the same intention behind each of my strokes. Now let's do the same thing, but on the left hand. And we'll go a nice appropriate speed of tempo di lerno. 1 and 2 and 3 and a left hand go. And again, another way we can think about that is by playing down, up, down, up, down stroke, up stroke, down stroke, up stroke. And so we're just combining those downstrokes and upstrokes. We're combining the mechanics and the motion to play the music. We're not seeing accented stroke, tap stroke, accented stroke, tap stroke. We are seeing downstroke from an accented position starting, upstroke, downstroke, upstroke, downstroke, upstroke. So in a sense, we could almost cover up the music as long as we know what stroke height we're starting with. And we could just play this and get the same idea. We have that down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, meaning we have a stroke that we're going to play a downstroke. Look where the stick lands. Nice and low, ready to play a tap stroke, a Mezzo Forte unaccented tap stroke. And then, see what I did? I did an upstroke, and now I'm set up for an accent. Okay, and so on and so forth. And that's how you want to start approaching your music now. Let's take the next example. So we have accent, tap, tap, tap. No, we don't. We have down, tap, tap, up, down, tap, tap, up. Okay, and it'll look like this. So again, starting from an accent position, down, tap, so tap to tap, like we did in our previous video, tap to tap, and then we have an upstroke. So this will still be a tap volume, but it's setting up for an accent by playing that upstroke. Okay, let's try this together here. 1 and 2 and 3 and a right hand go. Down, tap, tap, up, down, tap, tap, up, down, tap, tap, up, down, tap, tap, up. So hopefully this is kind of starting to make sense. As we do this on just one hand, it's not super hard to see what is happening here, but just to make sure, let's add in some more complicated accent patterns. So on the next example that we've got here, we've got accent, tap, tap, accent, tap, tap, accent, tap. Better way of thinking of that is down, tap, up, down, tap, up, down, up. And here it is. Let's try that on the left hand this time. 1 and 2 and 3 and a down, tap, up, down, tap, up, down, tap, up, down, up, down, tap, up, down, tap, up, down, up. Okay, hopefully this is kind of starting to set in. We're thinking of the next note that's coming rather than just the note we're playing and having no follow through with it. The stroke prep that we're playing, or the stroke type, is just the follow through. It's like if you're shooting a basketball, right? You're not just gonna toss it and call it a day. You have to have some follow through. I'm not much of a sport, but I do know that the way that everything is set up, the way that your arm is going, and the way that your follow through. Okay, never mind, I'm not much of a sport. Anyway, all parts of the process, including what comes after you shoot the ball, leads to you scoring the basket. All right, and then let's do one final single hand accent pattern. So we've got tap, accent, tap, accent, tap, tap, accent, tap, tap, accent, tap, accent, tap, tap, accent, tap. Or we could think up, down, tap, up, down, tap. So let's do that now. And for this example, I'm going to demonstrate playing both hands together to make sure that they're both the same height and mechanically functioning in a similar manner. 1 and 2 and both hands. Here I go. Up, down, tap, up, down, tap, up, down, tap, up, down, tap.
Hold on, you've
Talking about stroke preps.
been way too long now. Maybe you should
Come back for part 2.